What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today we're going to be doing my recommended settings and setup for franchise mode here in MLB The Show 21. And in this video, we're essentially going to run you through everything that I would do and all of my recommended settings for starting your franchise mode here on MLB The Show 21. Now, the reason that this video is coming out a bit later is because we are waiting for the Scout Scoops roster to come out before we do anything in franchise mode. Personally speaking, I recommend you guys check out their full minors roster whenever it comes out. It's been delayed due to server issues and all of that type of stuff. So unfortunately, I have not started a dedicated franchise mode this year in MLB The Show 21, but we will be hopping on that trend as soon as that full roster comes out with access to all of the minor league players. So the first thing that you guys are going to do in today's video is you're going to scroll over franchise mode at the main menu. Now, you may have already started a franchise mode, but don't forget you can start another, because if you click directly into franchise mode, it'll just take you into your latest played one. If you look at the bottom left hand corner of the screen, you will see that it says more options, and if you press that button, it's going to bring up the option to start a new franchise, to load a save file, or download from the cloud. Today we are going to be running through how to start a new file and the settings for that, so let's go ahead and hit start new. So once you hit that, it's going to bring you up the options to select which roster option you want to use. You can use current rosters, use default rosters, or load saved rosters. Using the current roster is going to use the updated roster that the game has. Utilizing the default rosters will use the opening day for the game rosters. So whenever the game first dropped, that's the roster it'll use. Or use load saved rosters. That's going to give you the access that we are going to be looking to do this year, and that's when the OSFM roster comes out, or Scout Scoops roster, whatever you want to call it. We'll be loading that roster because we'll be saving it out of the share files. However, today we don't have that option, so we're just going to be going with the default rosters or the current rosters, and that'll take us into our team selection screen. From the team selection screen, you have the option to do various different things. You can view the roster of the team that you are hovered over by pressing triangle, which is a really nice feature because you can distinguish between which teams you want to select right here. You don't have to back out and go look at the rosters in the edit menu or the roster menu. You can look at right here while you're starting the franchise and make a game time decision. But there are a couple of other things you can do here. You can select various teams that you want to be. Let's say you want to manage multiple teams, you can do that. If you want to just select one team, you can do that as well. In addition, you can do a custom team. You can create a new custom team or load a custom team to switch into place of the existing teams that are there, which is a really nice feature if you're looking to do something more fantasy related. Maybe you want to do one of those like college baseball type things that you've seen. You can create that team. You can load an existing custom team. You can find one off of the share files and download it, type of stuff. That can be a way that you guys go about it, and you can do it for every single team if that's what you wanted to do. Then in addition to that, you have the option to select what type of play style you want to go with using the right stick by flicking it right and left. You can go competitive, casual, or simulation. I go with simulation because I want to have the most true to real life experience. And don't forget one last thing on this menu. If you guys want to select every team and utilize those teams, you can just press square, and that will allow you to select every single team on the menu. Now, for the purposes of today's video, we're just going to select the Pittsburgh Pirates and press advance. And from here, you get some of the most important options within the game. This is really the meat and potatoes of this video and what you guys probably came here for. So from my perspective, I like to have GM contracts on. I like to have goals that I have to meet, or I could get fired from my team. I like the idea of, signing contracts to be extended with a team and things like that. So I leave GM contracts off. I leave fantasy draft off unless, let's say you guys want to do a full league fantasy draft. You can do that. I turn allow legend free agents off. And then CPU roster control, this is very important. I have this off. If you have it accessed so that you can control the CPU rosters, it's going to make it difficult to trade and stuff like that. It kind of complicates the way you have to do things. You have to, do longer processes for those types of things, and so I have CPU roster control off. I just want to have control of my roster and essentially prevent myself from having to do all that extra work. CPU trading, I leave that on. There is a slider. This is really important. There's a slider where you can reduce how many, basically the frequency of trades within the game. And that is something that I highly recommend you guys look at. We'll look at it at the end of this video, the sliders and a couple of sliders that are worth potentially tweaking for your franchise modes. But CPU trading, we leave that on. We leave ignore budgets off because realistically speaking, certain teams have higher budgets, certain teams have lower budgets depending on their market size and various different factors like that. So I recommend ignoring or leaving the ignore budgets off. In addition, we have force trades off. This, again, it's like the CPU roster control. It kind of complicates things if you have it on. In order to be more realistic, I like to leave force trades off. I leave the designated hitter on auto, which is going to have the DH on for AL teams and no DH for NL teams. I hope, personally speaking, and people might give me crap for this, I hope that the entire MLB goes to the DH eventually. I know that there are a lot of people that are opposed to that. There have been times where I play with the DH just strictly on. That's up to you guys whether you want to do that type of thing or not, but I'm just going to leave it on auto because currently speaking, in the current state of baseball, they don't have the DH in the NL. Then the extra inning runner rule. If you want to play more traditional baseball where you don't have an initial runner on second base whenever you hit extra innings, turn this off. However, the new rules state that whenever you reach extra innings, the teams are going to start with a runner on second. I like that option. It shortens a lot of the longer games for me. It actually makes things really entertaining from my perspective, so I'm going to be leaving that one on this year. And then we come to one of the more complex options here within the game, and that is whether or not you want to do all of these various different tasks within your franchise modes. Now, I really like the fact that MLB The Show always breaks these up into 3 different categories, and it gives you a star level down there at the bottom of how complex these things are. It's going to give you a good indication of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. From my perspective, I like to have all of these set to manual because various different things can get messed up. So let's say you have your lineups and rotations and injury management set to manual. What's going to end up happening is, if you have manager tasks set to auto, whenever your team hires or fires staff or changes the 40-man roster or adds free agents or makes a trade without you controlling it, it's going to change your lineups and rotations anyway. And so if you're going to have your lineups and rotations set to manual, you should likewise have your manager tasks set to manual. I know that it's complex. It's a lot to do, but from that perspective, I always leave these 2 set to manual because otherwise the team really kind of just ends up messing itself up more often than not. The only one that I consider setting to auto manage is the scouting. Now, if you're not new to the scouting system, I recommend you at least experiment with it, but it is something that you could go either way on. There's been times where I've scouted and I've done a better job than the CPU. There's been times where the CPU has done a better job than me. So it really kind of depends because you actually have scouts in this game that you can hire. It really kind of depends on how good the scouts are that you have. And you can always go in, even if you have this on auto manage, and kind of override things and tell them to scout a certain player and stuff like that. So that's a nice feature as well. Personally speaking, I go with manual on everything. It's going to be a decision for you guys on how much level of complexity you guys actually want to do. And then the final option here before you actually get into the season is whether or not you want to play spring training or not. More often than not, I skip spring training. Sometimes if I'm experimenting with a new team that maybe has a lot of prospects, or like let's say I did a Pittsburgh Pirates one this year, they have a lot of young prospects on the team that I haven't really played all that much with before. And so you might want to run spring training to get a little bit of time with those players, to get used to those players. It all depends on what you're trying to do. If you're hopping in as like the Dodgers or a team that's ready to win a World Series, you're probably just going to skip spring training because your players are good. You don't really have to worry about that type of thing. From this perspective, for this video, we're just going to go ahead and skip spring training and go right to regular season. Now, the last thing that I recommend you guys do whenever you're hopping into franchise mode here and setting up your franchise mode for the first time is you go to the top right hand corner of the screen to this little cog. You're going to click on that, and then you're going to go to your sliders. From the sliders, I recommend that you guys go down and look at a couple of different sliders that I think are worth essentially taking a look at. CPU pickoffs are something that I feel like happen maybe a little too often within the game. The CPU pitcher trying to pick off a player at first that may not even really be a player that could steal a base happens to me all the time. So a lot of the time I turn CPU pickoffs down one notch just to get a little bit more of a realistic frequency there. And then at the bottom here we go to base runner steal frequency. From the CPU perspective, it's like they're trying to steal bases almost every time they're out there sometimes. So depending on whether you're seeing too many of those or not, I turn that down a notch. Injury frequency, this is something that you could potentially play with, whether you want to go up or down. If you're experiencing too many injuries, I'm leaving it at base just to find out what happens with it this year, and I'm probably going to leave most of these at base just to figure out what happens with them, but I'm just warning you guys ahead of time that these are things you might want to look into. And then the final one here is trade frequency. Like I mentioned earlier, whenever you're selecting, how often, CPU trades on or off, you can affect how often they trade or not. So I personally recommend taking this down one, if not two notches, in order to prevent them from trading all the time. I don't know if they've really changed the logic this year with CPU trades, but in the past there have been tons of trades, and the league looks completely different by the time you reach the trade deadline and stuff like that. So I highly recommend that you guys, just know that this slider is here, and you can edit it up or down depending on what you guys are seeing within your franchise mode as you go along. And then the final note for this video here is going to be a presentation note. In terms of your franchise mode, it's going to depend on how you guys like to play your franchise mode. I like to go quick. Sometimes I like to get the full experience of a game with all the sideline reporting, the walk-ups, and all that type of stuff. But know that you can go from that settings menu that I showed you down to your gameplay settings and the presentation settings, and you can select what you want to play with. A lot of the time I play on fast play, and then I turn off batter walk-ups. I turn off in-game sideline reports, and sometimes I'll even turn off the in-game ticker depending on whether things are popping up and giving you too much notification during a game and things like that. Those are the types of things that I'm gonna turn off a lot of the time because I like to go quick through it. I like to focus on the team building aspect of things. That's what I like to see, and so that's what I go with. And just to highlight one more option that they do have within the game, this isn't me giving a recommendation here, just showing you guys that it's here. You can go to mode-specific options under your settings within franchise mode, and it's going to allow you to select each thing and set it to manual or auto. So even though they are grouped together, whenever you're setting it up, know that you can go through to specific ones and set each of those to automatic if you would like to set them that way. Very nice feature to have here, that you have the availability to change them as you go along. And with all that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully this helped you guys out get started on your franchise modes, or at least you found this information useful or got you thinking on something you might want to do a little bit different with your settings or sliders within your franchise mode. Leave a like on the video if you guys did like this or you enjoy these types of videos. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more franchise content, more MLB content, whatever it might be. And as always, leave your comments down below. What do you guys want to see next? Is there anything you could use help with? I'll feel free to leave that down there, and I'll try to get back to you guys and absolutely add it to my slate of videos. With all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one, and I hope you guys have a good night.